Okay, if we're ready, let's go ahead and take our seats and we'll begin. Thank you everybody for joining us. This is the NextGen Careers BoF. My name is David Huberman with ICANN. A lot of people watching this here at APNIC 48, and we're live streaming this. You are engineers. You're trained as engineers, and you're in the beginning of your career as network engineers, as cybersecurity engineers. And when things break in your network, for example, if there's a misconfiguration in BGP, you know what to do to fix it. You know there's a problem. You know BGP has buttons you can push and knobs you can pull to make BGP do what you need it to do. And the same is true when there are problems in your IGP or with DNS or what have you. You know what the problem is and you know how to fix it. Or maybe actually it's a new problem. Or maybe it's an interesting problem that you haven't encountered before. But you still know what to do, right? You can still turn to your colleague who may be physically near you, or maybe they're on Slack, and you can say, hey, this is going on and I have some ideas, but let's talk about how to fix this. Or maybe there's nobody to ask, maybe you just have to go to Google, right? And you can go to Google and you know what questions to ask to get the answers that you need from people who've also experienced this problem. And you know what to do because you're an engineer. And this is what we do. But how do you engineer your career? How do you go from being a network engineer to a network architect? How do you go from being a network architect to being a principal architect in charge of designing networks for global scale? How do you become a peering coordinator? How do you become a CTO? We can't ask that, we generally don't ask that same question of our colleagues on Slack or next to us. We can Google it a little bit. People write books. People give advice on how to advance your careers, but nobody tells you, here in network engineering, in this little small part of the world that we live in, no one tells you how to move from network engineer to CTO. So to try and help answer a little bit of those questions, very honored to present a wonderful panel we have here today, who's going to share some of their experiences that they've had and some of the things that they've learned that we hope can help you as you think about planning out your career. With us today, we have Joy Chan, the Deputy CEO of TWNIC. We have Swapneel Patnekar, who's the Managing Director of Shreshta IT Technologies. We have Narelle Wakely, who is the Principal Security Advisor at Trustwave. And we have Mr. Donald Clark from Google. So a little bit about the format. This is a discussion we're going to have over the next 45 minutes or so. This is a discussion between all of us here in the room. If you have questions at any point, please don't save them to the end. Please go ahead and stand up and move to a microphone. We'll see you and acknowledge you. And please don't hesitate to ask a question of a panelist or perhaps a question of all of the panelists. So, Joy, thank you for joining us today. We have a microphone for you. Joy is the Deputy CEO of TWNIC. And if you go to LinkedIn, and if you look at Joy and you look at her CV, you will see a career arc that is a model for anyone to follow. Joy has been an IT specialist, a senior systems programmer, a researcher, a chief division manager, a director, a senior director, a chief technology officer, and now the deputy CEO. It's a wonderful natural progression through the ranks. Joy, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about some of the experiences you had, especially early on in your career, some of the lessons you learned that shaped your career and really set you up for the success that you're enjoying today.
Sure. Thank you, Dave. I think it's my honor to be here. I think I'm going to use your microphone. Okay. It's an honor to be here to share with you. When I was younger, I wasn't as lucky as you guys are today because I wasn't able to having anybody to consult about my career. So it's very, very nice for occasions like this to be able to share about what my career path has been gone through. So one of the things I was thinking about when I accepted this invitation was looking back at my career path. What have I done? What is it that really brings me here today? So earlier days there was no internet. So it was very natural when a person graduated from computer science. My career was choosing between to be a system programmer or to be an application programmer. Little Joy had a big ambition. I was trying to write an operating system that's changing the world. So I went into a company and I was working on the operating system and to be a system programmer. During those days, I was very proud of my job because all these other people who's writing programs on the application layer, I was working on the system layer. And that's like the basic of everything. We didn't have network engineers or any other engineer type on the system level. So I had to look up into the networking, the system, primarily operating system was my goal. And I was proud because all these other application system programmers are doing their coding in their cubicle. I had an office. And the reason that I had an office is because every night the system has some hiccups. So in the morning, people would bring piles of dumps to my office that I have to go through before I can go home. I read dumps day after day for many, many years. Then I realized that I do know about something on this operating system. So from then on, I'm moving into application. So with the understanding and with the depth that I understand with the system, I get a lot of privilege to look at the different data sets, which we call files and things like that today. And one day, under my watch, one of this we call data set got crashed. And it was a very critical, important data set. Has a lot of the customer files, information's in there. I was shocked. I sit there, I didn't know what to do. Little did I know, my manager came to me. You know, when this big guy came over to me, I could not see the light or the sun. If you ever watch those John Wayne movie, you know, those heavy guys wearing a leather jacket. You know, he has boots with steel decoration on the tips. And he also has a Texas hat. So when he came over to me, he says, "What happened, Joy? What did you do?" Little Joy sits there because I have no idea what has happened. I know I did something, and that something was not a pleasant thing. Otherwise, he's not going to come over to stand in front of me. Shocked, didn't know what to do. But he didn't say anything. Look at me, a blank face, and said, "Follow me." He stood up, he walked, I followed. A couple of steps away, he turned over and said, "This is how you're going to learn the one of the biggest lesson that you're ever going to learn." I follow him aisle after aisle to this room. It looks like a storage room. And there he opened up the cabinet, took out a 9-track tape that has everything in there. And that's how I learned about backup and recovery in the hard way. Okay? So those of you may or may not know that during those days, those data are so valuable. And to save this backup copy in a separate place, that's so important. So the lesson or the takeaway that I got from him, which is what he told me, is that, Joy, always be brave. Have that courage to admit what you did. Because that's why gray hairs like his is there to help me to clear up the mess. Also, to help me pointing the direction about what to do. I took that very, very seriously. So ever since then, whatever the jobs that I take, I make sure I understand what my manager's expectation, for one, you always do. For two, that whatever that I do, I have always be honest and with the integrity to tell my manager, what did I do? If I did something good, it takes the credit, wonderful. If I did something that's not so good, at least somebody can stand with me. So coaches, you know, and the things that what the manager can do for me, if I don't have the basic trust, I don't get to the next step. And I appreciate those lessons, always in my heart. I give the credits to them. Thank you.
Narelle.
David.
So, Narelle, you are a a pretty big figure in the world of operational security these days. But you weren't always
No.
the principal security advisor. Talk a little bit about your days as a programmer.
Yes, so I started out programming the ATM applications for a major bank in Australia. Back then, the ATM systems were the banking systems of the time, and was introduced to encryption. Of course, we had to protect your PIN number, and then as time went by, credit card numbers and personal information. There was a lot of process work in setting up the keys for encryption, and also the chain of custody around encryption as well. So I got a taste of security during those application programming days.
So as you progressed through your career, you found yourself one day standing at a crossroads.
Yeah, so everybody who was in IT back in the year 2000 worked on the Y2K bug. And I was on a program with one of the major banks for 2 years and actually worked on tracing down all the shadow IT across the bank. So that's IT that business units have stood up themselves with a server under the desk, or that sort of thing, and cleaning up that sort of IT in preparation for the year 2000. So I got to understand the business side of the bank and formed a strong network with other areas and other departments in the bank. After the year 2000 project wrapped up, I had the opportunity to actually progress my career into the business side of banking, or stay technical, and had the opportunity to move in what we called back then IT security in an operational risk team. And I knew it was a real fork in the road for myself. Do I stay true to my IT background, or do I move into the business side of the bank and become a banker? And I decided that I actually really enjoyed those days working with encryption. I understood the need for privacy and why we have those sort of controls in place. So I decided, no, I'd stay with IT and technology and move into IT security. And I have been on that cybercrime wave ever since. So that was back in 2001. We had the first phishing incident against one of the major banks in Australia in 2003. Was investigating the first online banking frauds that were happening back then, and discovering Trojans targeting the banks and malware specifically targeting our customers. Responded to the first denial of service attack against one of the major banks in Australia, and it goes on, and it's been a very exciting, worthwhile career.
So when you were at that fork in the road and you chose the path you chose, it worked out really nicely. You could see where the future was headed in terms of security and IT.
But I think I was also playing to my strengths. I think you've got to understand what you're interested in, what your passion is, and go, you know what, I'd like to work more in that field. So it was sort of like reflecting and sort of going, no, I really enjoyed encryption. I really understood the need for security. I'd like to do more on that. So I don't think any of us could have predicted the future that we have with organised crime and cybercrime today. But back then I was playing to my strengths and my interests. And I think that's the call out for your career. Look at opportunities that you're interested in, that you'd like to find out more about, not because you think you have to do that.
I have a question now for Donald.
I'll use the same mic.
So Donald is in charge of network acquisition and strategy here in the Asia Pacific region for a small outfit called Google. And I imagine one of the questions you get a lot when people actually have the courage to ask you about is, how do I become a network engineer? How do I become a guy at Google, right? But
yeah, less so these days.
Less so these days, right. But you actually are not a network engineer by training.
I'm not a network engineer by training, no.
Tell the audience what your college degree is in.
My college degree is in chemical engineering.
Yes. So it's a very obvious jump from chemical engineering to network acquisition and strategy.
Yeah.
No, but seriously, at the beginning of your career, you graduate from the university with a degree in chemical engineering, and then what happens?
Well, I guess chemical engineering is just sort of plumbing or cake mixing, just cooking and plumbing. And it was nice, but I didn't feel like I wanted to, do it a lot. So I had a few different job offers when I left college, university. One was to go into banking, and one was to go into IT consultancy, and one was to go into chemical engineering. And I won't use the words here, but bankers in London, I don't know, just morally felt wrong. And I thought, well, what I'd liked about my engineering was I liked the wide range of challenges. I liked working in small teams. I liked working with people solving problems. So I sort of abstracted what I'd enjoyed. And so then I'll try the IT consultancy stuff. And chemical engineering did have, little bits of programming and sort of algorithmic sort of modeling in it as well. So there was a loose connection there. There was enough that I could spin a story.
So you spent the early part of your career doing IT consulting.
For 3 years.
Yeah, 3 years at some of the big consulting firms, PwC and Booz Allen Hamilton. But then you made a pretty big change in your career.
So between, I think I was always just slightly at the tail end of things. So after PwC, I went to help start up Ask Jeeves in the UK, which was a search engine. If I'd maybe gone to a different search engine to help start up, I might have not been here today. That didn't go so well. And I was just trying to chase this exciting, .com thing. Oh, I'm missing out on everything. But it was interesting. It was a good lesson in due diligence. So if you are going to join a young company, do try and understand the underlying technology principles they're using. And the ones at Jeeves were just not scalable and really, really quite bad. And then after that, I was made redundant and I went to work for Booz, doing more strategy consulting. And then by that time, we were living in London and we were getting sort of unhappy with living in London. And I was never seeing my family, my wife. So I thought, well, what can we do? So we went to New Zealand. And we went to New Zealand so that I didn't end up doing the same work that had kept me away from home all the time. And there's not many jobs where I went to do, so I went into the public service. I went to work for the Treasury in New Zealand, doing some investment management and investment advice for the government there.
You did wind up in banking after all.
I did. I never thought of it like that. Oh my goodness, what a moral failure. But it was for the public, so that felt better. And then after Treasury, I was still interested in technology, and aspects of that, and I helped look after the science investments for the government there. And so there was an opportunity that came up to go and work for the Prime Minister in New Zealand, the Prime Minister's department. So I went to work there for a little bit of time, and one of my lovely achievements there was helping a team of people to structurally separate Telecom New Zealand and help invest in what's become the UFB, which is, if you're looking to do a sort of fibre to the home network, I definitely look at more New Zealand than Australia. Just saying. No offence. And that was really good. And then I did that for a little while, and then this is just a bit of a rambling, sort of vague. There's not a super common thread to these.
No.
No, okay, right, fine. And then after that, someone said, hey, Donald, we're setting up the country's research and education network.
Yep.
And so I went to run that and be the CEO there. And I stayed there for 5 years. And then my wife was wanting to go back to do teaching full time. So I stayed back and looked after the kids for a couple of years while she was doing her teaching full time. Did little bits, did like sort of a national radio slot every couple of weeks during that time. And then she got her teaching qualifications, wanted to pull back, and we needed some money again. So I applied for some jobs, and I applied for a couple in Wellington, but it's a small city. I'd had a chance to do some amazing things, and the only job offer I got was for Google, doing Interconnect.
Right.
Pairing consortium, which I'd had a little bit of introduction because I'd been a counsellor for .nz.
Right.
So I'd been involved in the internet space and this lovely community, which I deeply love. And so that gave me a little intro on the networking side into Google.
So one of the things I hear is, in your career, one of the keys to success has been flexibility. Life changes, life goals outside of your career dictate some of the changes which require you to be flexible in what you're doing and how you're doing it.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment. I think flexibility, but with a sense of, coupled with a sense of boredom at times. So like I enjoy, after a certain amount of time, once I think I understand something and I've done okay at something, then I'll start to get bored with it. So it's not been super good fiscally, because there's people that I started with PwC or partners, definitely in a better position fiscally. But yeah, flexibility and a willingness to be bored and to be challenged. Yeah, that's.
So one of the things we've heard from our first three panelists is different ways to move forward in a career, sometimes at the same company, but definitely within the same industry generally thing. But they're always working for someone, right? Donald just saying, some of the choices he made were good for him, but weren't necessarily the best fiscal ones. Sometimes we're engineers and we decide, you know what, we want to leverage our engineering talent to make sure that we never work for anybody. And that's Swapneel. Our friend Swapneel here is the managing director of Shreshta IT Technologies. Swapneel, can you tell us just very quickly a little bit about Shreshta and what it is you do?
Yeah. David, thanks for the opportunity to begin with. Before I answer the question, I'd like to put this on record. Joy, I have a few gray hair as well. I think in my case, before I actually begin with the intricacies of that, I'd like to give a background information. So I come primarily from a small city called as Belgaum. It's on the southern western part of India. And the problem that exists in such a location primarily is there is a lack of an IT ecosystem, right? Because there is a lack of an IT ecosystems, one of the things which I realized at a very early stage when I was looking at options was to perhaps look at leveraging this as an opportunity where network operators or even small, medium enterprises, micro, small, medium enterprises who maybe not having options with respect to network and security. So I think that was the pain point that was typically the start for looking for, how can value be added in that specific ecosystem, right? And so we do a lot of consultancy for network operators because that, even though in that region of where I live, there are probably 25 to 30 network operators that just cannot, from a business perspective, cannot give you the churn that might be required. So there is the additional element comes from serving network, small, medium network organizations or institutions which are not having the necessary, you can say network and security elements in their network.
So for someone who's out here listening and thinking about what they want to do in their career, and they're thinking, I really like the idea of perhaps making my own imprint on this industry and starting my own company. Based on some of your experiences, what are some things you wish you knew when you first started that you know now?
Oh, I think I'll probably take more than 37 minutes to answer that specific question. And I don't want to be the guy, I just realized I don't want to be the person who is, between the evening social and now for that matter. But I'll probably try to put it in a very short span of time. I think one of the key elements was finding the key market which you are trying to serve. And that is one of the things as an, not only from a network, technical perspective, but even as an entrepreneur perspective, that is extremely important. A lot of people spend a lot of energies, which even in my case, I have spent a lot of energies on solving problems which weren't there, right, to begin with, or were not of value addition for the industry for that matter. So I think that would be one key thing which I would probably try to point out.
Question for Narelle. Tell us a little bit about what you think some of the future job opportunities, some of the future career that we should start preparing for today.
So jobs of the future are going to be very different from the traditional jobs where we've come from. AI and robotics is going to be huge. But with that, anything to do with data analytics, anything to do with information processing is jobs of the future. So my advice for anybody who is entering into the workforce or studying now is to understand where data is going, how we should be using that, the algorithms used for AI and robotics. What does it mean culturally and ethically, how we process that data? So it's not just jobs which are processing, mechanical, technology related. There's a lot of ethical, culture, regulatory jobs that are going to be needed for us to be able to live safely in the future and work safely together as a global community, which is what the future is going to be all about.
So Narelle gives some very good advice about some of the places you may want to think about getting to over the next few years. But sometimes the question is, how do you get there? Joy, I have a question for you. When you think about hiring, when you think about filling some of the positions, and let's say you have two candidates who have the same hard skills, the same technical background, the same technical competencies. What are some of the soft skills? What are some of the things that differentiate a good candidate from a bad candidate that we need to think about as young network engineers? What are some of the things beyond just the hardcore engineering?
Wonderful questions. When I interview with young engineers, if they're coming from pretty much on the same level as far as their training, their technical skills, what are the soft skills that we are looking for? I think a lot of times, depending on the culture, when I'm in company A and company B, I may looking for different criteria. For example, if I'm in a very aggressive company, I look for the person that willing to talk aggressively, be honest and willing to share, and always speak up. Sometimes that I have been working with companies that's a little bit on the conservative side, I have to say. Then I will looking for the people with skills that's harmony, willing to work as a team players, be able to really take orders, probably without asking too much questions. I have always encouraged engineers asking questions, but I think that there is a difference between asking questions and asking the right questions with the right attitudes. So I think it's smart for anybody who go into an interview for any jobs or even at the job to understand the company culture first and then to make sure that you are a part of it. Because regardless the culture it is, then you have to make sure that you are comfortable with it. So be yourself in that regards.
I have a similar question for you, Donald, because you work at Google, and Google's a really
Hiring.
sexy kind of company for.
Again, less so.
If you're a network engineer and you're thinking about your future career, wow, I could work at a place like Google.
Yeah.
I think that's a pretty cool thing for a lot of people. In terms of setting yourself up in the early part of your career, both with your hard skills and your soft skills, what are some of the keys to getting hired at a large company like a Google?
Yeah, so we have, I made two comments.
Yeah.
Right. First of all, a few years ago, we largely, not disbanded, but really shifted the focus of a lot of our network engineering teams on the NetOps teams into more of an SRE role. So there was a deliberate push to transition at the same time as we were well into the whole SDN journey. There was a deliberate transition away from network engineering towards network SRE. Right? And so that was a shift that was quite difficult for some people, right? For some people that had been router jockeys, BGP jockeys and stuff all their life, to go from being in control, right, and you know, having root access and all the rest of it, to go to giving software engineers requirements, right, or training to be an SRE. I watched a few people, some people jump at it, and some people move to different areas, and some people didn't handle it so well. So first thing I say is that even in something that seems as reasonably secure as network engineering, it can take different forms, it can mutate. So I think be aware of that is one thing I'd say. In terms of hiring, in terms of working for a company like Google, we have, I think there's 5, when you get all your interviews, there's about 5 things that we check for, right? And one of them, cheesily enough, is Googliness. And so it's actually one of the criteria you'll have. And one of your interviews would be on leadership and Googliness, right? And what does it mean? It means different things for different roles. But it usually means a combination of, in our company right now, the ability to own a problem, right? The ability to work with others, to lead without being in charge, to listen, which is incredibly hard for a lot of the people we employ. To be an ally, right? To not always be the one talking. And do the right thing. I think from some of the roles I've been involved with, which are more relationship-facing roles, one of my personal tests is the airport test, which is, would I be okay being stuck in an airport overnight with this person, right? Or after like 8 hours of sitting chatting to them, would I be like going crazy? But that's more me personally, I think. So generally those attributes, they're about, I think engineers can be very focused, right? And care a lot about the solution and care a lot about arguing the point. I think doing that, but doing it respectfully and being willing to immediately backtrack when someone's got a better idea. So that's a better idea, I want to hear yours. Okay, let's do that, all right? I think having that intellectual honesty and modesty, which I think is easier to get older and you realize you know less and less. So balancing the certainty of an early career set of knowledge with some of the almost lack of movement that possibly comes with that sort of Socratic position later on is also important for us.
And speaking of that, oh, go ahead. Oh, yes.
Hi. My name is Farah Diva. I'm from Indonesia. I have two questions. Okay, first of all, every generation have their own attitudes, like baby boomers different with millennials, etc. How do you overcome with it in the internet community, in your company itself? And the second question is, wait a minute. The second question is, I'm focused in community development, and I want the elder and the youth can work together. But sometimes the problem is the youth said that the elder don't want to involve the youth, and the elder would say the youth doesn't want to take responsibility. And what is your advice for both sides so we can work together? Thank you.
Who was that? Anybody? Okay, I can maybe answer the second one. I'm not sure about the first one. That's a tough question. Working with people when they're not listening, or you're trying to, I think your question was about how do I work better with somebody when they're not working with me or not listening to me? Is that right? Or we have a difference of opinion?
So, because I work in community development and I want the elder and the youth to work together.
Ah, an elder and a youth to work together.
But the elder would say the youth doesn't want to take responsibility, and the youth would say the elder don't want to involve the youth. So
I don't know. I mean, yeah, multiple generations. I had a wise manager at the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet. I was the youngest person there. I was 28 or 29 at the time, and he assigned me to buddy up. My mentor, my buddy, was the oldest advisor there, who was like just pre-retirement. He was nearly 60. And it was fabulous for both of us. We really got on. But it wasn't in a pressured environment. So what that helped me with was actually realizing that working across the generations, when we were just buddies, we weren't actually having to deliver something together. It helped me understand the differences, right? And now it's not a solution to the immediate problem, but if you can have the generations mixing more and working together more when they don't have to deliver something right now, right? Maybe it's a mentoring or a buddy program. That may be a way to help people understand. If it's just, it has to be solved just now, I think it's just standard management techniques of, forcing people to sit down, listen to each other, draw it out and share ideas. I don't think there's anything fundamental about, generations. I think it's too easy to say, oh, that's an old person behaving like an old person, right? Or that's a young person behaving like a young person. I mean, I've been behaving like a 50-year-old since when I was 20, so, I just get them to talk.
So one of the things I like about this industry, this is my 21st year in this industry, and one of the things I really like is if you're willing to stand up and say, hi, my name is David, and I'm talking to you, and you've been in this industry for 20 or 30 years, we can have a discussion, and we can form a relationship. And those mentorships that were forced on you and the gentleman there, these happen very naturally in our industry. You have to just, as a newer engineer, you have to take the initiative to introduce yourself. And you can do it over email, by the way, or you can do it over chat. You have to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about yourself and ask about them and what some of the experiences they've had, and they're going to share it with you. And those types of experiences, those types of mentorships have been key in this industry for as long as it's been around. The responsibility is on the older generation to share their knowledge, but the responsibility is also on the young generation to reach out and say, hi, this is my name, I'm in this industry too, and I'm really nice to meet you. That's how these things happen. Please, sir.
Hello, my name is Randy. I'm from Guam. I'm not sure if you know where that is, but it's a small island below Philippines. I got a question.
A couple of cables go through there.
Oh yeah, a lot of cables go there. So we're a developing network, and you know we're in just terms of the whole best practice of today, we're catching up. But my biggest question is, I've met a lot of network engineers that came from biology, that came from history, that became network engineers, right? So the path to becoming the best network engineer you could sometimes be reliant on, it could rely on certifications or projects. In just terms of your path, what do you think is more important to you, certifications or the projects, or just is it case by case basis?
I think this is going to be, probably a subjective answer, but I would probably put more weightage on the experience aspect of things more than the certification angle of it, primarily because of the pressure that can come into the picture when you're doing, an implementation for, of a network for that matter, or it may apply to anything in that case.
Narelle, let me ask you, in relation to Randy's question, when you are putting together teams, you care more about experience, you care about technical certification, compliant, required certifications. Where's the balance there when you're putting together big operational security teams?
It's all of that. So people bring different skills and capability into a team. Some people may be technical and have the technical certifications. There's people out there that collect their certifications and pride themselves on how many certifications they get. There's other people that don't have any certifications but are very good at problem solving, are creative, are innovative, and they bring an aspect to the team that the person who has credentials doesn't have. I like new people that have passion, that are interested to learn. We talk about a skills shortage in cybersecurity. That's not necessarily true. We can teach cybersecurity skills very quickly. It's more about drawing from a much broader discipline than we traditionally have in the past. So I would say that to build teams, you need a full diversity of capability from different generations, from different cultural backgrounds, from different genders, from different experiences. And it's all about coming together as a team with a single purpose and understanding what that purpose is.
Okay, we're going to take one more question from the audience.
Yeah, I have a question to Joy. So, in a male-dominating field, what is the biggest challenge for you? When you face, I'm just quit.
Okay.
Okay.
So the question is that what is the biggest challenge for me in my career, I guess. Okay, as a woman, wonderful questions. We have actually two women here.
Yeah.
But let me share about my experience. I think that it is, I have to say that sometimes harder simply because we women tends to trying to balance between work and family, just a little bit maybe heavier. This may not be very fair for some of the fathers here. But I think that in order to be able to maintain the balance, as I said earlier, I think that at work, integrity and honesty is one of the things that I value very heavily. So I always make sure that in my work environment, especially my direct boss understand where I'm coming from. When I have a need, an urgent needs, that he has that understanding so that we may be able to work out something so that I can satisfy the responsibility of my work and also be able to play some parts where my family is. And I think that there are times that it's really going to be a challenge, but that's where the family support comes in. So as long as I think everybody understands that and be able to take the trade-offs, that was how I have been going through for all these years.
Thank you.
All right, well, we do want to get you to the social on time, so we're going to wrap this up. So I want to say thank you very much for listening. We have a quick presentation coming up after this. So I want to say thank you to Joy and Swapneel and Narelle and Donald. They will be here this week. I strongly encourage you to come up to them, introduce yourself, say hi, make a contact. Learn to ask good questions about how to move forward in your career. All right, Sunny.
Sorry, David. There's a question from the remote participant. Okay. I think we should take this.
Sure.
This is from Ashwin Reddy in India. As a student pursuing engineering in electronics and in networking, any suggestions to become technically strong and build new technical skills to be job ready for future as we are getting into AI and robotics?
Probably I can, I have no experience with respect to the fields the question is referring to, but I think coming from India, I can maybe stress on the element of probably having an internship at an organization, which will add a lot of value going forward, where the weightage is not just on the what has been learnt in college, but also maybe on the field as well. I think that can add value as well.
I'd just quickly say reach out to any networking organisation in that particular field, so AI or robotics or something like that in your country, and join that networking community and get involved.
We good? All right. Thank you very much, everybody.